I was sitting at Uncle Robert's mahogany desk, carefully restoring his vintage pocket watch, the only memento he'd ever given me, when my phone lit up with Aunt Vivian's name. The funeral was tomorrow, and I expected last-minute arrangements. Instead, her words sliced through me like ice. "Don't bother coming, Olivia. He never loved you. You were just his charity case." The watch slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering against the polished wood as tears blurred my vision. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her cruel words echoed in my mind as I stared at the watch, its gold case gleaming in the soft morning light filtering through my apartment windows in Portland. The small hands had stopped at 3:42, frozen in time like my relationship with the man who had been the closest thing to a father I'd ever known. Outside, rain tapped gently against the glass, mirroring the tears that threatened to fall. I'm Olivia Chen, 29, an architectural designer working remotely for a sustainable building firm. My life is a carefully constructed routine of video calls, detailed drawings, and small moments of peace, tending to my collection of succulents, brewing specialty teas, and sketching buildings during lunch breaks. For the past 7 years, I've also been the invisible support beam of my extended family, sending $900 each month to help with Uncle Robert's medical expenses. The watch felt heavy in my palm as I picked it up again, running my finger along. The inscription, "Time reveals truth." Uncle Robert had pressed it into my hands during our last visit, his eyes knowing, his smile sad. "Keep this safe, Olivia," he'd whispered. "It matters more than you know." Now he was gone, and according to Aunt Vivian, I wasn't even welcome at his funeral. My phone buzzed again, a text from my cousin Madison. "Mom's right. Just send the money for the catering bill and stay away. No one wants drama tomorrow." I set the phone down, my chest tight with a familiar ache. Even in grief, all they wanted was my financial contribution, not my presence. For years, I'd been the family's silent benefactor. When Uncle Robert was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I'd increased my hours at work to help cover his treatments. While my cousins Madison and Ethan posted family photos on Instagram with captions like, "Family is everything," I was transferring funds to cover their parents' mortgage. They smiled for pictures while I worked overtime, my name conveniently forgotten when the time came for acknowledgements. Madison, 2 years older than me at 31, had always been the family's golden child. With her perfect blonde highlights and carefully curated wardrobe, she was the successful marketing executive who somehow never had enough money to contribute to family expenses. Yet at every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and 4th of July gathering, at Uncle Robert's lakeside home in Oswego, it was Madison who received the praise, the attention, the love. "Madison's got such a creative mind," Aunt Vivian would gush, ignoring the fact that I'd designed the very house they were sitting in. "She gets that from her father." I'd smile and continue washing dishes or setting tables, my contributions, both financial and practical, invisible to everyone except Uncle Robert. He'd find me later, away from the others, and squeeze my hand. "They don't see, but I do," he'd say softly. "You're the heart of this family, Olivia." Now that heart was breaking. I stared at Madison's text message, anger mixing with grief. 7 years of supporting them, of putting my own dreams on hold, of sacrificing vacations and a down payment on my own home, all to be told I wasn't welcome at the funeral of the only person who truly saw me. I thought back to last Christmas, when I'd arrived at Uncle Robert's house with arms full of gifts I'd spent months choosing. The living room was alive with laughter and holiday music, the scent of pine and cinnamon heavy in the air. Madison was perched on the arm of her father's chair, showing off her new engagement ring from her investment banker fiancé, Derek. "It's 3 carats, she'd announced, her voice carrying over the Christmas carols. "Derek says nothing less. Would do for a Bennett." I'd placed the gifts under the tree and slipped into the kitchen to help with dinner, only to find Uncle Robert there, his hands shaking slightly as he attempted to carve the turkey. "Let me help," I'd offered, taking the knife gently. "They're all out there celebrating Madison's engagement," he'd said, his voice low. "But you're the one who paid for Vivian's car repairs last month so they could visit Madison in Chicago." His eyes, wise and sad, had met mine. "You've always been the strong one, Olivia. The one who gives without needing to be seen." I'd blinked. Back tears, focusing on the turkey. "It's nothing, Uncle Robert." "It's everything," he'd corrected, placing his trembling hand over mine. "And someday, they'll understand that." The memory faded as I looked down at my phone, at Madison's demanding text. 7 years of $900 monthly payments. 7 years of being their emergency fund, their safety net, their invisible supporter. And now, I wasn't even welcome to say goodbye to the one person who'd valued me. Have you ever felt like an outsider in your own family? Like your worth was measured only by what you could provide? The rain intensified outside my window, drumming against the glass as I opened my banking app. There it was, the scheduled transfer for next week, labeled Family Support. My finger hovered over the cancel button, a lifetime of obligation warring with newfound resolution. Preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Uncle Robert's watch sat beside my laptop, its gold case catching the light. I could almost hear his voice, "You're the heart of this family, Olivia." But a heart can only take so much before it needs to protect itself. I pressed cancel transfer and then confirm. The screen flashed, recurring payment cancelled. A weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying lifted from my shoulders, leaving me breathless with the sudden lightness. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't going to be their ATM. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. I picked up Uncle Robert's watch, its weight comforting in my palm, and closed my eyes. Would he be disappointed in me for standing up for myself? Or would he understand that sometimes love means setting boundaries? The Portland rain created a soothing rhythm against my windows as I made a cup of chamomile tea, the steam rising in delicate curls. I would honor Uncle Robert in my own way, without the family that had never truly accepted me. I would remember his kindness, his quiet strength, his ability to see worth beyond surface appearances. My phone began to ring almost immediately, Aunt Vivian's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, then listened as her message played, her voice sharp with indignation. "Olivia, the caterers need payment today. I don't know what game you're playing, but this is completely inappropriate. This is about respect for Robert, not your feelings." Respect. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Where was their respect for me? For my grief? For the years I'd silently supported them? I sent a simple text in response, "I'm grieving too. I'll honor Uncle Robert in my own way." Then I silenced my phone, picked up my sketchbook, and began to draw the lake house Uncle Robert had loved so much. With each stroke of my pencil, I felt closer to him, honoring his memory through creation rather than obligation. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the Portland rain having washed everything clean. My phone had accumulated 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, each more demanding than the last. Madison had escalated from irritation to fury. "The funeral is ruined because of you. No flowers, catering downsized, mom's a wreck. Hope you're happy in your selfish little world." I traced the outline of Uncle Robert's watch, now hanging from a chain around my neck. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years being selfless, only to be called selfish the moment I stopped providing financial support. Instead of attending the funeral where I wasn't welcome, I took the day off work and visited the Japanese garden in Washington Park. Uncle Robert had loved it there. We'd walked its winding paths during his visits to Portland, discussing architecture and nature's perfect designs. As I sat by the koi pond, watching the fish create ripples in the still water, I felt a strange peace settle over me. "You were right, Uncle Robert," I whispered, holding the watch. "Time does reveal truth." My phone vibrated in my pocket, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another family member calling to berate me, but something made me answer. "Ms. Chen? This is Elijah Patterson from Wentworth Legal Associates." The voice was warm, professional. "I'm handling your Uncle Robert Bennett's estate. Would it be possible for you to join a video call tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the reading of his will? He left specific instructions that you should be present." My heart raced. Yes, of course. Thank you. Excellent. I'll send the details to your email. And Ms. Chen? Your uncle spoke very highly of you." The call ended, leaving me staring at the koi pond, tears blurring the orange and white shapes moving beneath the surface. Uncle Robert had wanted me there. Despite what Aunt Vivian had said, he had made sure I would be included. That night, I barely slept. By 9:45 the next morning, I was sitting at my desk, hair neatly combed, wearing the architect's brooch Uncle Robert had given me for my college graduation. My laptop was open to the video call platform, Uncle Robert's watch hanging from my neck. My hands trembled slightly as I waited, a mix of grief and anxiety making my heart race. At exactly 10 a.m., the call connected. On my screen appeared Mr. Patterson, a distinguished man with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes, seated at a large desk with papers spread before him. In separate windows were Aunt Vivian, her face tight with barely contained emotion, Madison, her eyes red-rimmed but makeup perfect, Ethan, looking uncomfortable in a suit, and Derek, Madison's fiancé, who appeared bored by the proceedings. Aunt Vivian's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What is she doing here?" she demanded, not bothering to address me directly. Mr. Patterson's expression remained professional. "Miss Chen is here at the explicit request of Mr. Bennett. Now, shall we proceed with the reading of the will?" He adjusted his glasses and began to read from the document before him. I, Robert James Bennett, being of sound mind, hereby declare this to be my last will and testament. I half listened as he detailed small bequests, family photos to Ethan, his golf clubs to a friend, a modest sum to his favorite charity. My mind was on Uncle Robert, remembering his gentle guidance, his quiet understanding, the way he'd always made me feel valued when the rest of the family overlooked me. And now, to the matter of my primary estate, including the lake house in Oswego, my financial investments, and remaining assets, Mr. Patterson continued, his voice cutting through my memories. Aunt Vivian leaned forward, her expression eager. Madison adjusted her hair, a small smile playing at her lips. They had always assumed they would inherit everything, the house they'd treated as their showcase, the investments they'd never contributed to. These assets, in their entirety, I leave to my niece, Olivia Chen. The words hung in the air for a moment before their impact registered. Madison gasped audibly. Aunt Vivian's face contorted in shock and rage. Ethan's eyebrows shot up, and Derek suddenly looked much more interested in the proceedings. This can't be right, Aunt Vivian sputtered, her voice shrill. There must be some mistake. Mr. Patterson continued calmly. Mr. Bennett included a letter explaining his decision. He lifted another paper. He writes, Olivia has been the quiet strength of this family for years, supporting us financially and emotionally without recognition or thanks. While others took, she gave. While others sought the spotlight, she worked behind the scenes to ensure our family's stability. She is the embodiment of true family loyalty, and I trust her to honor this legacy with the same grace and wisdom she has shown throughout her life. Tears streamed down my face as Uncle Robert's words washed over me. He had seen everything, every sacrifice, every contribution, every moment I'd felt invisible. And in his final act, he had made sure everyone else would see it too. This is outrageous. Aunt Vivian's voice cut through my thoughts. We're his actual family. She's just Robert's niece, Mr. Patterson interrupted firmly. And his chosen heir. The will is legally binding and quite clear. Madison was staring at me, her perfect composure cracking. You planned this, didn't you? Always playing the victim, the martyr, while manipulating Uncle Robert behind our backs. I took a deep breath, feeling Uncle Robert's watch warm against my skin. For years, I'd stayed quiet, accepted their dismissal, their exploitation. But not anymore. I gave this family $900 every month for 7 years, I said, my voice steady despite the tears. I paid for your mother's car repairs, your father's medical treatments, holiday meals, and countless emergencies. I never asked for recognition. I never expected anything in return. I did it because I loved Uncle Robert, and he was the only one who ever made me feel like I belonged. Ethan looked down, a flush spreading across his face. At least he had the decency to appear ashamed. Mr. Patterson, I continued, thank you for your time. I'll be in touch to handle the necessary paperwork. With that, I ended the call, cutting off Aunt Vivian's renewed protests and Madison's accusations. The silence in my apartment was absolute, broken only by my shaky breathing and the soft ticking of the wall clock. Uncle Robert's final gift wasn't just the material assets, it was validation. Acknowledgement of my worth that no one could deny or dismiss. For the first time, the family had been forced to see me, to recognize what I had done all these years. I held his watch, running my thumb over the inscription, Time reveals truth. He had known all along that this moment would come. He had prepared for it, ensured that in the end, the truth of our family dynamic would be laid bare for all to see. Outside my window, the Portland sky was clearing after another morning shower, sunlight breaking through the clouds. A new day. A new beginning. The weight of seeking approval from people who would never give it had lifted, replaced by the certainty that the one person whose opinion truly mattered had valued me all along. Have you ever received validation when you least expected it? Has someone seen your worth when others missed it completely? I opened my design software and began working on plans to renovate the lake house. Not to erase Uncle Robert's presence, but to honor it, to create a space that reflected his values, warmth, welcome, and genuine connection. Perhaps someday, it could become a retreat for artists and architects, a place where creativity and kindness were celebrated above status and appearance. The journey ahead would be challenging. I had no illusions that Aunt Vivian and Madison would accept the situation gracefully. There would likely be legal challenges, emotional manipulation, attempts to paint me as the villain in their narrative. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of their disapproval. Uncle Robert had given me more than an inheritance, he had given me the confidence to stand in my truth, to value myself even when others didn't. I touched the watch hanging around my neck, feeling closer to him than ever. Thank you, I whispered, knowing that wherever he was, he could see that his final gift had been received not just with gratitude, but with understanding. The rain had stopped completely now, leaving the world outside my window fresh and new. I opened it, letting the clean air fill my apartment, breathing deeply as if for the first time. The path forward was mine to choose, no longer constrained by obligations to people who had never truly seen me. Time had indeed revealed truth. And that truth had set me free. The following week unfolded like a surreal dream. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members who had barely acknowledged my existence before. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Old family friends called to reminisce about Uncle Robert, conveniently mentioning their financial difficulties in the same conversation. Each notification made the watch around my neck feel heavier, as if Uncle Robert was reminding me to proceed with caution. It was Madison who finally showed up at my apartment door on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of a client meeting when the aggressive knocking started. Apologizing to my colleagues, I muted my microphone and peered through the peephole to see my cousin's perfectly highlighted hair and designer raincoat. "I know you're in there, Olivia," she called, her voice carrying through the door. "We need to talk." I finished my meeting quickly, then took a deep breath before opening the door. Madison pushed past me into the apartment, her eyes scanning my modest living space with barely disguised disdain. "So this is where you've been living while claiming you couldn't afford to contribute more to Dad's care," she said, dropping her wet umbrella onto my hardwood floor. Water pooled around it, seeping into the grain of the wood. I picked up the umbrella and placed it in the stand by the door. "I've been sending $900 a month for 7 years, Madison. That's over $75,000. She waved her hand dismissively, her large engagement ring catching the light. "Pocket change compared to what you're getting now." The comment stung, reducing years of sacrifice to pocket change. I touched Uncle Robert's watch for strength. "What do you want, Madison?" She turned to face me, her expression suddenly softer, more vulnerable. It was the look she'd perfected over years of getting her way. "The lake house has been in our family for generations, Olivia. Mom grew up there. I was supposed to have my wedding there next spring. You can't just take it away from us." "I'm not taking anything away. Uncle Robert made his choice. Because you manipulated him." The vulnerability vanished, replaced by familiar accusation. "Always playing the quiet, helpful niece while poisoning him against us. What did you tell him about us, Olivia? What lies did you spin to get your hands on our inheritance?" I thought of all the times I'd sat with Uncle Robert during his treatments, reading to him when the tremors were too bad for him to hold a book. How I'd never once complained about my family to him, believing that maintaining peace was my responsibility. I never had to say anything, Madison. He saw it all himself. I kept my voice calm, though my heart was racing. "The way you and Aunt Vivian treated me like an ATM. How you'd call only when you needed money. How you excluded me from family photos but expected me to fund family vacations." Madison's eyes narrowed. "That's not true. You chose to help. Nobody forced you. And now I'm choosing to honor Uncle Robert's wishes." I moved toward the door, opening it in clear dismissal. "I have work to finish." She didn't move. "Mom is devastated. She can barely get out of bed." "Is that what you wanted? To destroy our family?" The guilt trip was so familiar it almost made me laugh. How many times had they used emotional manipulation to extract money, time, or silence from me? Our family was broken long before this, Madison. The only difference is that now everyone can see it. I gestured to the open door. "Please leave." Instead, she reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. "Mom had our lawyer draw this up. It's a fair offer for the lake house and investments. We keep what's rightfully ours, and you get a generous compensation." She placed the envelope on my coffee table. "Be reasonable, Olivia. You know this is what Dad would have wanted." I didn't touch the envelope. If that's what Uncle Robert wanted, he would have written it in his will. Madison's composed facade cracked. "You ungrateful little," she caught herself, smoothing her expression with visible effort. "Think about it, Olivia. This could get ugly. Family secrets coming to light, legal battles dragging on for years. Is that really how you want to remember Dad?" The threat was clear. They would fight, drag Uncle Robert's name through legal proceedings, tarnish his memory if necessary. All to get what they believed they deserved. I opened the door wider. "Goodbye, Madison." After she left, I picked up the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a contract offering me $75,000, exactly the amount I'd contributed over 7 years, in exchange for signing over everything Uncle Robert had left me. It was as if they were erasing my inheritance, returning me to exactly where I'd started, while they took everything else. I dropped the contract into my recycling bin and turned to the window. The Portland rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening in afternoon sunlight. Across the street, a mother helped her young daughter jump over puddles, both of them laughing each time water splashed up. That evening, I received an email from Mr. Patterson, asking if I could meet him at his office to discuss some additional aspects of Uncle Robert's estate. We arranged to meet the following afternoon. The Patterson law offices occupied the top floor of a sleek downtown building with views of Mount Hood on clear days. The receptionist, a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, led me to a conference room where Mr. Patterson waited with a leather portfolio and several file folders. "Miss Chen, thank you for coming." He gestured to a chair. "I imagine the past week has been challenging for you." I nodded, thinking of Madison's visit and the dozens of messages I'd received. "That's one way to put it." He smiled sympathetically. "Family dynamics often become complicated around inheritances. Which is why your uncle took certain precautions." Mr. Patterson opened one of the folders and removed several photographs. "These were taken over the past 7 years. Your uncle hired a private investigator to document his care and family interactions after his diagnosis. The photos showed family gatherings where I was setting tables or washing dishes while others posed for pictures. Hospital visits where I sat alone with Uncle Robert while readings from cards signed by the family sat unopened on his bedside table. Bank statements highlighting my monthly transfers alongside credit card statements showing Aunt Vivian's shopping sprees and Madison's vacations. He knew they would contest the will, Mr. Patterson explained. He wanted to ensure you would be protected. Tears blurred my vision. Even in his final arrangements, Uncle Robert had been thinking of me, anticipating the storm that would follow and preparing me to weather it. "There's more," Mr. Patterson continued, sliding another folder toward me. "Your uncle kept a journal during the last 5 years of his life. He was quite detailed about who visited, who helped, who asked for money, and who gave it." He tapped the folder. "This provides clear evidence of your ongoing support and their patterns of behavior." I touched the folder tentatively, feeling like I was intruding on Uncle Robert's private thoughts. "I don't want to hurt them, Mr. Patterson. I just want to honor Uncle Robert's wishes." "Your uncle understood that. He wrote specifically that these materials should only be used if necessary to defend his decisions." His expression softened. "He thought very highly of you, Miss Chen. He told me you were the only one who saw him as a person rather than a provider or a burden." The words touched something deep inside me. How often had I felt the same way, valued only for what I could give, never for who I was? Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. A letter your uncle asked me to give you privately. After the will reading." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Uncle Robert's shaky handwriting. I tucked it into my bag, wanting to read it alone. "Thank you. Your aunt's lawyer contacted me this morning," he added as I stood to leave. "They're threatening to contest the will on grounds of undue influence. Madison mentioned that might happen." He nodded. "It's a common tactic, but with the documentation your uncle provided, they have very little chance of success. Still, these things can be draining, emotionally and financially." "I understand." I straightened my shoulders. "But I won't be intimidated into giving up what Uncle Robert wanted me to have." Mr. Patterson smiled. "He said you'd say that. He also said to remind you that time reveals truth." The inscription from the watch. I touched it through my blouse, drawing strength from its familiar shape. "Thank you, Mr. Patterson, for everything." That evening, I sat on my small balcony watching the sunset paint Portland's skyline in shades of gold and pink. Uncle Robert's letter lay unopened in my lap, his familiar handwriting calling to me. Finally, as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I carefully broke the seal. "My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, then time has done what it inevitably does, and I have left this world behind. I hope my departure wasn't too difficult for you. I know how deeply you feel things, even when you try to hide it. You're probably wondering why I made the decisions I did regarding my estate. The truth is both simple and complex. You earned it. Not just through the financial support you provided so consistently, though I kept meticulous records of every transfer, every bill you paid, every loan that was never repaid, but through the genuine care you showed me. When the Parkinson's diagnosis came, Vivian and the children treated me differently immediately. Suddenly I was fragile, an obligation, a problem to be managed. But you, Olivia, you still saw me. You brought architecture magazines to my appointments, argued with me about sustainable design, asked my opinion on things that had nothing to do with my illness. You gave me dignity when others offered only pity. I've watched for years as this family took advantage of your generous nature. I've seen the hurt in your eyes when your contributions went unacknowledged, when your presence was treated as an afterthought. I wanted to intervene many times, but you always changed the subject when I tried. Your protection of them, even as they failed to protect you, spoke volumes about your character. The watch I gave you belonged to my father, who received it from his father. The inscription, "Time reveals truth," has been our family motto for generations. I found it to be profoundly accurate. Given enough time, people reveal who they truly are, not through their words but through their actions. Over time, Vivian and the children revealed their priorities. And you, my dear Olivia, revealed your heart. The lake house was always special to you. I remember how you used to sit on the dock for hours as a child, sketching the way the light played on the water. Your first serious architectural drawing was of that house. You showed it to me when you were just 15, explaining all the ways you'd update it while preserving its character. It belongs in the hands of someone who loves it for what it is, not for its market value or status. I know they will not make this easy for you. Entitlement rarely surrenders without a fight. But remember that you are stronger than they know, stronger, perhaps, than you know yourself. You have built a life on your own terms, supported others without recognition, and maintained your compassion despite every discouragement. Don't let them make you bitter, Olivia. That would be the only true defeat. Instead, use what I've left you to build the life you've put on hold for too long. The life you deserve. Time has revealed the truth of who you are, the best of us all. With eternal love and pride, Uncle Robert. P.S. Check the back of the watch. There's a compartment I never showed you. Tears streamed down my face as I read. And reread the letter. Uncle Robert's voice seemed to surround me, as clear and warm as if he were sitting beside me on the balcony. I carefully folded the letter and held it to my heart for a moment before turning my attention to the watch. I'd never examined it closely, assuming it was a standard pocket watch. Now, following some instinct, I pressed gently on different parts of the case until I heard a soft click. The back plate swung open, revealing a hidden compartment containing a small, tarnished key. I recognized it immediately, the key to Uncle Robert's private study in the lake house, a room that had always been off-limits to everyone but him. What secrets had he kept there? What was he entrusting to me now? My phone rang, breaking the moment of wonder. Aunt Vivian's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. Olivia, her voice was tight with forced politeness. I've been trying to reach you all week. Did Madison speak with you? She did. And I received your offer. Excellent. If you'll just sign the paperwork and I'm not signing anything, Aunt Vivian. I kept my tone gentle but firm. Uncle Robert wanted me to have the lake house and his investments. I intend to honor his wishes. The forced politeness vanished. You ungrateful child. After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Aunt Vivian? The question slipped out before I could stop it, years of suppressed, hurt-finding voice at last. When have you ever acknowledged my contributions to this family? When have you included me in anything except the bills? That's absurd. We always treated you like family. Family doesn't ban someone from a funeral. Family doesn't tell someone they were never loved. My voice broke slightly on the last words, the pain of that moment still fresh. There was a moment of silence before Aunt Vivian spoke again, her voice cold. I see Robert's lawyer has been filling your head with nonsense. Fine. If that's your decision, don't expect any mercy from us. We'll see you in court. The call ended abruptly. I placed my phone on the small table beside me and looked up at the stars, feeling strangely calm despite the threat. Uncle Robert had prepared me for this battle. More importantly, he had given me something I'd never fully had before, validation of my worth, confirmation that my experiences were real, that my hurt was justified. The key from the watch gleamed in my palm, a mystery waiting to be solved. Whatever Uncle Robert had left in his study, whatever message or treasure awaited me there, I knew it would be another thread connecting us, another affirmation that someone had truly seen me. Have you ever realized that the greatest gift isn't material wealth, but the knowledge that you were truly known and valued by someone who mattered to you? As darkness settled over Portland, I made a decision. Tomorrow, I would drive to the lake house in Oswego. I would use this key to unlock whatever final message Uncle Robert had left for me. And I would begin to claim not just the inheritance he'd left me, but the sense of self-worth he'd always tried to nurture in me. The stars reflected in the watch's glass face, infinite possibilities mirrored in a circle of time. For the first time since Uncle Robert's death, I felt a sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I would face them with the certainty that I was acting in accordance with the wishes of someone who had loved me unconditionally. Time reveals truth. And the truth was that I had always been worthy of love, even when others had failed to see it. The drive to Oswego was a journey through memories. Each mile of Highway 43 carried echoes of past trips, Uncle Robert pointing out architectural details of buildings we passed, teaching me to see beyond the obvious to the underlying structure and purpose. I'd made this drive countless times. Over the years, but never alone, never as the owner of the lake house that waited at the end of the winding road. As I rounded the final curve, the house came into view, and my breath caught. Nestled among towering Douglas firs, the three-story craftsman stood as it always had, dignified, welcoming, timeless. Morning light gleamed on the blue-gray siding and the wide windows that faced the lake. Uncle Robert had preserved its original 1920s character while subtly modernizing its systems, a balance of tradition and innovation that had inspired my own architectural philosophy. I parked in the circular gravel driveway and sat for a moment, gathering courage. This was no longer a place I visited, it was mine. The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. The key to the front door was on the same ring as the mysterious key from Uncle Robert's watch. As I approached the broad porch with its hand-carved railings, memories washed over me, summer evenings watching fireflies from the swing, winter afternoons reading by the stone fireplace, autumn mornings helping Uncle Robert rake leaves into piles that I would later jump into, sending them scattering in a riot of red and gold. The lock turned smoothly, and the heavy oak door swung open. I expected musty air and silence, but instead, the scent of lemon polish and fresh flowers greeted me. In the entryway, a vase of lilies, my favorites, stood on the antique table. A card propped against them. Miss Chen, Mr. Bennet arranged for weekly housekeeping to continue after his passing. I've taken the liberty of freshening things for your arrival, as he predicted you would come once you received his letter. If you need anything at all, my number is below. With condolences, Eleanor Wright, housekeeper. Another example of Uncle Robert's thoughtfulness, his ability to anticipate needs before they arose. I touched the lilies gently, then moved through the familiar rooms, the living room with its wall of bookshelves and comfortable leather chairs, the dining room where family holidays had been celebrated, the updated kitchen where I'd helped Uncle Robert prepare countless meals. Everything was immaculate, yet deeply personal. Uncle Robert's reading glasses still lay on his favorite side table. His collection of architectural models still lined the built-in shelves in the hallway. His presence remained palpable in every corner of the house. Finally, I stood before the heavy mahogany door of his study. In all my years of visiting, this room had remained private, accessible only to Uncle Robert himself. When asked, he'd simply smile and say, "Everyone needs one place that's entirely their own." The small key from the watch slipped into the lock. I turned it, hearing the satisfying click of the mechanism releasing. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped into Uncle Robert's inner sanctum. Sunlight streamed through floor to ceiling. Windows overlooking the lake, illuminating a space that took my breath away. The room was octagonal, with custom bookshelves lining every wall between the windows. A magnificent desk of burled walnut dominated the center, its surface clear except for a leather-bound journal and another envelope bearing my name. But what truly stunned me were the walls above the bookshelves. Every available space was filled with architectural drawings, my architectural drawings. Projects from college, sketches I'd shared with Uncle Robert over the years, designs I'd created for competitions and clients. He had framed them all, creating a gallery of my professional journey. In the corner, on an architect's drafting table, lay the very first drawing I'd ever given him, my childish reimagining of this lake house, created when I was 15 and just beginning to dream of a career in architecture. He had preserved it under glass, my tentative pencil lines protected for all these years. Tears blurred my vision as I approached the desk, running my fingers over the smooth wood. Uncle Robert had created a shrine not to himself, but to me, too. My talent, my growth, my passion. In this most private space, he had surrounded himself with evidence of my creativity, my vision. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands and opened it to find a single sheet of paper. "Olivia, welcome to your studio. I've always believed that creativity needs space to flourish, physical space, mental space, emotional space. I hope this room gives you all three." The journal contains the combinations to the safe behind the northwest bookshelf. Inside, you'll find documentation that may prove useful in the days ahead, as well as some items I believe will bring you joy. Create boldly, my dear. The world needs your vision. Uncle Robert I opened the leather journal, finding it filled with Uncle Robert's distinctive handwriting. The first entry was dated shortly after his Parkinson's diagnosis 5 years ago. Began. Preparations today. Olivia visited, bringing dinner and those architectural magazines I enjoy. She designed a special holder for them that accommodates my tremors, so thoughtful, so observant of others' needs. Vivian called to discuss power of attorney. She seemed more concerned about access to accounts than my prognosis. I flipped through more entries, each one documenting interactions with family members, financial contributions, mine carefully noted, visits, phone calls, holiday gatherings. Uncle Robert had created a meticulous record of the family dynamics, revealing patterns that were painful to read but impossible to deny. Christmas Eve. Olivia arrived early to help with preparations, stayed late to clean up. Brought thoughtful gifts for everyone despite her limited budget. Madison complained that her sweater was not designer within Olivia's hearing. Spent $3,000 on Derek's watch but contributed nothing to the meal Olivia provided. Must speak with Mr. Patterson about adjusting my will. On the final page was a series of numbers, the safe combination. I moved to the northwest bookshelf and found the hidden button that caused it to swing forward, revealing a wall safe behind. The combination worked on the first try, and the heavy door opened to reveal several accordion files, a velvet jewelry case, and a smaller lockbox. I carried everything to the desk and began with the accordion files. They contained bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, all meticulously organized and annotated in Uncle Robert's hand. There were also dozens of photographs. Uncle Robert and me at my college graduation, the two of us working on the dock repair project the summer I turned 20, images of us cooking together, gardening together, simply sitting in companionable silence. In every photo, the connection between us was evident, the similar tilt of our heads when concentrating, the shared smile when something amused us, the comfortable closeness that comes from genuine affection. The jewelry box contained several pieces with notes attached, my grandmother's pearl necklace, a pair of sapphire earrings that had belonged to Uncle Robert's mother, a delicate bracelet with architectural motifs that he'd had custom-made for my 30th birthday but hadn't lived to give me. The lockbox required another key, which I found taped to the inside lid of the jewelry case. Inside were stock certificates, significant holdings in sustainable technology companies that aligned with my environmental values. A note explained that these were separate from the main investment portfolio, a special collection he'd been building specifically for me based on companies I'd expressed interest in over the years. I was sitting at the desk, surrounded by these treasures, when my phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number with an Oswego area code. Hello? Ms. Chen? This is Eleanor Wright, the housekeeper. I hope I'm not interrupting, but there's a situation you should be aware of. What kind of situation? I asked, suddenly alert. Mrs. Bennet and her daughter are at the front gate. They're quite insistent about coming in. I told them the property is now yours and they would need your permission, but they're threatening to call the police. My stomach tightened. Of course. They would come here, would try to assert ownership through physical presence if not legal right. Thank you for letting me know, Eleanor. I'll handle it. I gathered the most important documents and placed them in my bag, along with Uncle Robert's journal. Then I walked through the house to the front entrance, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. From the porch, I could see them at the gate, Aunt Vivian in an expensive black pantsuit that seemed chosen to suggest ongoing mourning, Madison in designer jeans and a silk blouse, both of them radiating entitlement and anger even from a distance. I walked down the path and approached the gate, Uncle Robert's watch hanging heavy around my neck, a talisman of strength. Olivia. Aunt Vivian's voice carried across the space between us. Open this gate immediately. This is ridiculous. I stopped a few feet from the wrought iron barrier that separated us. Hello, Aunt Vivian. Madison. What brings you here? Don't play innocent, Madison snapped. You know exactly what you're doing, flaunting your theft of our family home. I haven't stolen anything. Uncle Robert left this property to me. Because you manipulated him when he was vulnerable, Aunt Vivian said, her voice carrying the absolute conviction of someone who believes their own lies. We've lived here for 40 years. This house is part of our identity. I thought of the room filled with my drawings, of Uncle Robert's meticulous documentation of their behavior, of the consistent pattern of taking without appreciation. You've treated it as your possession, but have you ever truly seen it? The way the light changes on the lake throughout the day? The sound the old maple makes when the wind comes from the east? The history in every hand-carved banister and stained glass panel? They stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. In a way, I was the language of appreciation rather than acquisition, of stewardship rather than ownership. We're prepared to be generous despite your behavior, Aunt Vivian said after a moment, her tone shifting to one of forced reasonableness. Our final offer is $100,000. That's more than fair considering your circumstances. Her gaze flicked dismissively over my simple jeans and sweater. I'm not selling, I said simply. Madison stepped forward, gripping the bars of the gate. Then we'll take it through the courts. We'll make sure everyone knows how you took advantage of a sick old man. Is that what you want? To drag Dad's name through a legal battle? The threat might have worked before, my lifelong fear of conflict, my desire to keep peace at any cost, would have made me vulnerable to such manipulation. But something had changed. Uncle Robert's letters, his carefully preserved evidence, his belief in me, they had awakened a resolve I hadn't known I possessed. Uncle Robert anticipated this. I said, keeping my voice calm. He left extensive documentation of his decision-making process, including recordings of conversations where you discussed putting him in a facility to gain control of his assets sooner. Aunt Vivian's face paled. That's a lie. Is it? He also documented every financial contribution I made over the years, alongside records of how that money was spent. Did you know the private investigator followed you to the spa the day after I paid for Uncle Robert's medication? The day you told me you couldn't afford to contribute because you were barely making ends meet? Madison's grip on the gate tightened. You're bluffing. I reached into my bag and withdrew several photographs, Aunt Vivian emerging from an exclusive day spa, Madison and Derek boarding a private yacht, both incidents occurring within days of my emergency transfers to cover what I'd been told were critical family expenses. Uncle Robert kept receipts, I said, holding up the images. Literal and figurative ones. If you pursue this in court, all of it becomes public record. Is that what you want? They stared at the photographs, shock and fury mingling in their expressions. For the first time, I was standing my ground, refusing to be intimidated or manipulated into surrendering what was rightfully mine. This isn't over, Aunt Vivian hissed, turning away from the gate. Come, Madison. We're clearly wasting our time with her today. Madison lingered, her expression shifting from anger to calculation. You know you don't belong here, Olivia. You never have. Playing house in Dad's home won't change that. The words were designed to wound, to trigger the insecurity I'd carried my entire life, the feeling of being an outsider, unwelcome, tolerated rather than embraced. But standing on Uncle Robert's property, my property now, with the evidence of his love and trust surrounding me, the barb missed its mark. You're wrong, I said softly. I've always belonged here. Uncle Robert knew it. Now I know it too. I turned and walked back toward the house, not waiting to see them leave. Their opinions no longer defined me. Their approval was no longer necessary for my sense of worth. Inside, I returned to the study, to the room that Uncle Robert had created. As a testament to his belief in me. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. I sat at his desk, my desk now, and opened his journal again, finding comfort in his familiar handwriting. Midway through, a passage caught my eye. Watched Olivia today as she helped with the garden. There's a quiet strength in her that reminds me of the foundations of this house, unseen, unacknowledged, but bearing the weight of everything above. I wonder if she knows how remarkable she is, how her steadiness anchors us all. Vivian and the children take without seeing, receive without gratitude. But Olivia gives without expectation, loves without condition. When the time comes, she'll be the one to preserve what matters most, not just the property, but its soul. His words washed over me like a benediction, healing wounds I hadn't fully acknowledged even to myself. Uncle Robert hadn't just left me his material possessions, he had entrusted me with his legacy, his values, his vision of what this place could be. The house felt different now, not a battleground for family disputes, but a sanctuary, a place of possibility. I walked from room to room, seeing not just what was, but what could be, the sunroom transformed into a gallery for local artists. The spacious kitchen hosting community cooking classes, the grounds open for architecture students to study the craftsman design principles. Uncle Robert had always believed in using privilege to create opportunity for others. Now I could honor that belief, transform this inheritance into something that extended beyond myself, that created ripples of positive change. My phone buzzed. With a text from Mr. Patterson, judge denied their emergency petition for temporary control of the property. First victory. More to come. Stay strong. I smiled, feeling a weight lift. The legal battle wasn't over, but this initial victory suggested that Uncle Robert's preparations would prove effective. His foresight, his meticulous documentation, his understanding of the family dynamics, all would help protect what he had entrusted to me. As evening approached, I moved to the back porch overlooking the lake. The water reflected the sunset in ripples of gold and crimson, a living canvas that had inspired me since childhood. I held Uncle Robert's, my watch, tracing the inscription. With my thumb. Time reveals truth. The truth of who values you. The truth of your own worth. The truth of what matters most. For years, I had measured my value by others' recognition, had sought validation from those who were incapable of seeing beyond their own desires. I had poured energy into proving myself worthy of love that was always conditional, always just. Out of reach. Uncle Robert had seen me clearly, had valued me unconditionally. And in doing so, he had given me the greatest inheritance of all, the courage to see and value myself. The lake grew dark as night fell, stars appearing one by one in the clear sky. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more decisions, more opportunities to stand firm in my newfound strength. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I felt at peace with the path ahead. Have you ever realized that your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it, but by your own courage to stand in your truth? I slipped the watch into my pocket and took a deep breath of the pine-scented air. Whatever came next, I would face it with the certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. 3 months passed like the turning of seasons. Spring blossomed into summer, painting the lake with new colors each day, dawn's soft pinks, noon's vibrant blues, sunset's fiery oranges. I'd taken a leave of absence from my architectural firm to focus on settling Uncle Robert's estate and defending against the legal challenges Aunt Vivian and Madison had launched with predictable ferocity. Mr. Patterson had been right, Uncle Robert's meticulous documentation proved invaluable. His journal entries, financial records, and the private investigators' reports created an unassailable narrative of his decision-making process. After 2 bitter court appearances where their lawyer attempted to portray me as a manipulative opportunist, the judge had seen through the facade. Yesterday, their final appeal had been rejected, the inheritance officially secured. Now I stood in the newly renovated sunroom, surrounded by local artists and community members. The lake house's transformation had begun, not with architectural changes. The bones of the place were too perfect to alter, but with a shift in purpose. What had once been a private family retreat was becoming a center for creativity and connection. Olivia, this is remarkable, said Eliza Jenkins, the director of a nearby arts education program for underprivileged youth. She gestured to the walls where paintings, photographs, and mixed media pieces created by her students hung alongside works by established local artists. When you approached us about hosting this exhibition, I never imagined anything this elegant. I smiled, watching as visitors moved from piece to piece, engaging with the young artists who stood proudly beside their work. Uncle Robert always believed that beautiful spaces should be shared, not hoarded. He would have loved seeing the house like this. The Robert Bennett Community Arts Foundation, Eliza read from the elegant plaque near the entrance. A fitting tribute. The foundation had been my first major initiative after the inheritance was settled. Using a portion of the investment portfolio Uncle Robert had left me, I'd established a nonprofit dedicated to supporting arts education and providing exhibition space for emerging artists. The lake house, with its spacious rooms and spectacular setting, served as both headquarters and showcase venue. Miss Chen? A hesitant voice drew my attention. A girl of about 16 stood nearby, her hands twisting nervously in front of her. I'm Sophie. My painting is the one of the blue heron by the dock. Sophie. I recognized her name from the program. Your piece is stunning. The way you captured the light on the water, it's technically impressive and emotionally resonant. Her face lit up. Really? That means a lot coming from you. My art teacher told us you studied architecture and understand composition and stuff. I'd love to hear more about your process, I said, genuinely interested. What inspired you to focus on the heron? As Sophie explained her daily observations of the lake birds near her apartment complex, her initial shyness transformed into animated enthusiasm. This was exactly what Uncle Robert would have wanted, young talent finding confidence, building connections, seeing possibilities for their future. The event continued into early evening, the summer light lingering as it does in the Pacific Northwest. I was saying goodbye to the last few guests when Eleanor, the housekeeper who had become something of a house manager, approached with a concerned expression. Miss Chen, there's someone at the gate who's asking to see you. I think you should come. Something in her tone made me tense. Aunt Vivian again? Eleanor shook her head. No, it's your cousin. The young man, Ethan. I hadn't seen Ethan since the video call with Mr. Patterson 3 months ago. Unlike Madison and Aunt Vivian, he hadn't participated in the legal battle. Hadn't made public accusations or shown up unannounced to demand entry to the property. His absence had been notable, but not entirely surprising. Ethan had always been the quietest member of the family, overshadowed by Madison's assertiveness and Aunt Vivian's dominance. I'll come, I said, curious about this unexpected visit. Ethan stood just outside the gate, hands shoved into the pockets of his faded jeans. At 33, he looked older than his years, his shoulders slightly stooped, his expression guarded. When he saw me approaching, he straightened, an uncertain smile flickering across his face. Hi, Olivia. I hope it's okay that I came by. I unlocked the gate, studying my cousin's face. We had never been close. Ethan had followed Madison's lead in most family dynamics, but he had never been actively cruel either. His sin had been one of omission, of failing to stand up when others mistreated me. It's fine, I said, opening the gate. Come in. We just finished an art exhibition. So excuse any disarray. He followed me up the path toward the house, his gaze taking in the subtle changes I'd made to the grounds, new plantings of native species, seating areas positioned to enjoy different views of the lake, the small sign directing visitors to the gallery entrance. "The place looks good," he said awkwardly as we reached the porch. "Different, but good." I offered him a seat in one of the Adirondack chairs overlooking the water. "What brings you here, Ethan? I haven't heard from you since the will reading." He sat, his lanky frame folding into the chair as he stared out at the lake. The silence stretched between us until finally, he spoke. "I came to apologize. For everything." He turned to face me, his expression pained. "For standing by while Mom and Madison treated you like you didn't matter. For accepting your help without acknowledgement. For being a coward." The directness of his words surprised me. What brought this on? Dad's journal. He reached into his messenger bag and withdrew a familiar leather-bound notebook. After the case was dismissed, Mom went on a rampage, throwing things, screaming about injustice. She broke Dad's favorite vase, the one from Japan. I was cleaning up the pieces when I found this hidden in the base. He handed me the journal. Unlike the one in Uncle Robert's study, this one was older, the leather cracked with age. I opened it carefully, recognizing Uncle Robert's handwriting from decades earlier. "It starts the year you came to live with us after your parents died," Ethan explained. "Dad documented everything, how Mom resented your presence, how he fought to keep you with us, how he set up separate accounts to ensure you'd have college money that Mom couldn't touch." I ran my fingers over the pages, reading snippets of Uncle Robert's private thoughts from 20 years ago. "Vivian suggests sending Olivia to boarding school. Claims it would be best for everyone." I refused. "The child has lost everything, she needs family, stability, love. If Vivian cannot provide the latter, I will do so doubly." And later, Olivia's teacher called today. Her architectural drawing won the state competition. Vivian said nothing when I shared the news at dinner. Madison sulked because it overshadowed her dance recital. Only Ethan offered congratulations. "Must do better at celebrating this child's gifts. She deserves to be seen." Tears blurred my vision as I read Uncle Robert's words, his frustration with his wife's coldness, his determination to protect me, his pride in my accomplishments. All these years, I'd believed he'd simply tolerated me as an obligation. The reality was far more profound. He had actively chosen me, had fought for me, had loved me deliberately and persistently in the face of his family's resistance. "I had no idea," I whispered. "Neither did I, not really," Ethan admitted. "I mean, I knew Mom was harder on you, that Madison was jealous of your relationship with Dad. But I didn't understand the extent of it until I read this." He gestured to the journal. "Dad saw it all, how they treated you, how I failed to stand up for you. His disappointment in me is all over those pages." I closed the journal gently. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you deserve to know the whole truth. And because—" He hesitated, then continued with visible effort. "Because I want to make amends. Not for the inheritance, that's yours, fair and square. But for being the kind of person who would stand by while his family mistreated someone who never deserved it." The sincerity in his voice touched something deep within me. Of all the family, Ethan had been the least directly hurtful, but his silent complicity had been its own kind of betrayal. "What do you want from me, Ethan?" He shook his head. "Nothing. That's not why I'm here. I needed you to know that Dad was right about you. That at least one other person in this family recognizes that now." We sat in silence for a while, watching as the evening light played across the lake. Somewhere nearby, a loon called, its haunting cry echoing across the water. I saw the sign. "About the Arts Foundation," Ethan said eventually. "That's a beautiful way to honor Dad." "It felt right," I replied. "Using what he gave me to create opportunities for others. He would have loved that." Ethan smiled, a genuine expression that reminded me suddenly, painfully, of Uncle Robert. "You know, he used to tell me I should be more like you, not just smart, but kind, thoughtful." I never really understood what he meant until now. I studied my cousin's face, seeing not the family that had rejected me, but a person trying to find his own way forward, separate from the toxic patterns that had defined our relationships for so long. "What will you do now?" I asked. "Are you still living with Aunt Vivian?" He shook his head. "I moved out last month. Got a small apartment near the community college. I'm taking classes in environmental science. It's a start." "That's great, Ethan." "Yeah, well, Dad always said I had a knack for understanding natural systems. Figured it was time to explore that." He hesitated. "Mom doesn't know I'm here. She and Madison, they're still pretty bitter. They're selling the house in Portland, moving to Seattle to be closer to Madison and Derek." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be." His expression hardened slightly. "The way they behaved, it's not right. I can see that now. As the conversation wound down, I walked Ethan back to the gate. Before leaving, he turned to me once more. The foundation, are you looking for volunteers? I have free time on weekends. The offer caught me off guard. You want to help? If you'll have me. No pressure. I'd like to be part of something positive for a change. I considered him for a long moment. Trust didn't come easily. After years of disappointment, but redemption was possible. Uncle Robert had believed in second chances, in the capacity for growth and change. We're hosting a workshop for high school students next Saturday, I said finally. Environmental art installations. Could use someone with knowledge of local ecosystems. The smile that broke across Ethan's face was worth the risk of disappointment. I'll be there. Thank you, Olivia. After he left, I returned to the porch with both journals, the one Uncle Robert had left me in his study and this newly discovered record of my earlier years with the family. Together, they told a story of quiet devotion, of persistent love. In the face of resistance, of one man's determination to protect and nurture a child who had lost everything. As darkness fell over the lake, I opened my laptop and began to write, not architectural specifications or foundation bylaws, but my own story. The narrative that had shaped me, the journey from orphan child to uncertain adult to a woman standing firmly in her own power. Uncle Robert had documented his perspective, now it was time to claim my own voice, to transform pain into purpose, rejection into resilience. The words flowed easily, a river long dammed now finding its natural course. When I was 12 years old, I lost my parents in a car accident. Within a single moment, my world shattered into unrecognizable pieces. I was sent to live with my uncle, his wife, and their 2 children. From the beginning, I understood I was an obligation, not a welcome addition. My aunt's tight smiles, my cousin's resentment, all sent the clear message that I was taking up space not meant for me. But my uncle saw me. In a household where I was trained to make myself small, to need little, to expect nothing, he created moments of belonging. A book of architectural drawings appearing mysteriously on my bed. A quiet word of praise when I brought home perfect grades. A hand on my shoulder when the weight of being unwanted became too heavy to bear alone. For years, I believed that I needed to earn love through service, through financial support, through silent acceptance of dismissal and disregard. I poured my resources, emotional and financial, into a family that saw me as a convenient source of help but never as an essential part of their circle. What I didn't understand until recently was that true love never requires you to diminish yourself. Real family sees your worth not as a function of what you provide, but as intrinsic to who you are. My uncle knew this truth. In his quiet way, he tried to show me. And in his final act of love, he forced me to see it for myself, to recognize my own value, to claim my rightful place, to stop accepting scraps from a table where I deserved a full place setting. I wrote through the night, pouring years of unspoken truths onto the digital page. By dawn, I had the outline of a memoir, not a bitter accounting of family wrongs, but a roadmap for others who had experienced similar journeys of invisibility and emergence. As the first light touched the lake, turning its surface to liquid gold, I titled the document, Time Reveals Truth, A Journey from Invisibility to Inheritance. The weeks that followed brought unexpected developments. Ethan proved to be a dedicated volunteer, his knowledge of local ecosystems enhancing the environmental art programs. Though awkward at first, our working relationship gradually evolved into something approaching friendship, not the forced connection of family obligation, but the organic growth of mutual respect. The memoir manuscript, shared first with a local writers group, caught the attention of a literary agent who specialized in inspirational narratives of personal transformation. Your story will resonate with so many people, she told me during our first meeting. The themes of invisible labor, emotional neglect, and finding self-worth outside of family validation, these are universal struggles. I signed with her. Not for fame or fortune, but because Uncle Robert had taught me that sharing our truths creates bridges to others walking similar paths. If my journey could help even one person recognize their own worth sooner than I had, the vulnerability of exposure would be worthwhile. 6 months after Uncle Robert's death, the foundation hosted its first major event, a weekend symposium on sustainable architecture and environmental art. Architects, artists, educators, and students gathered at the lake house to share ideas, create collaborative installations, and forge connections across disciplines. Standing at the podium to deliver the opening address, I looked out at the diverse faces turned expectantly toward me. My gaze caught on a familiar figure at the back, Ethan, now a regular part of the Foundation's volunteer team, setting up the recycling stations with quiet efficiency. Welcome to the first annual Bennett Symposium on Creative Sustainability, I began, feeling Uncle Robert's watch warm against my skin where it hung on its chain. This gathering represents everything my uncle valued: innovation, education, community, and stewardship of beautiful spaces. As I spoke about the intersection of architecture and environmental responsibility, about creating structures that honor both human needs and natural systems, I felt a sense of coming full circle. The little girl who had sketched dream houses at this very lake, the teenager who had found escape in architectural drawings, the young woman who had supported others while putting her own dreams on hold, all these versions of myself had led to this moment of purpose and clarity. My uncle used to say that the most enduring structures are those built on honest foundations, I concluded. This is true of buildings, relationships, and lives. When we build from authenticity, when we honor our true nature and purpose, we create something that withstands the tests of time and circumstance. The applause that followed felt like a benediction, an affirmation of the path I had chosen. As the symposium proceeded, I moved through sessions and workshops, engaging with participants, facilitating connections, watching as creative sparks ignited between unlikely collaborators. During a break, I escaped to the dock for a moment of solitude. The September air carried the first hints of autumn crispness, the lake reflecting a sky of perfect blue. I sat at the edge, feet dangling above the water, and opened Uncle Robert's watch. Inside the case, behind the clock face I had admired since childhood, was an inscription I had discovered only recently: "To see truly is the greatest gift we can give another." Uncle Robert had seen me, my potential, my worth, my essential self, when others had looked past me. In doing so, he had given me the foundation to eventually see myself clearly, to recognize my own value independent of others' validation. The water lapped gently against the dock pilings, a rhythmic pulse like time itself marking moments of clarity. Behind me, the lake house hummed with conversation and creativity, with possibilities being born from collaborative energy. Before me stretched the lake, constant yet ever-changing, like the self I was continuing to discover. Had Uncle Robert known how completely his final gift would transform me? Not just the material inheritance, the house, the investments, the financial security, but the deeper bequest of self-recognition, of unwavering validation, of the courage to stand firmly in my own truth? I closed the watch, its familiar weight comforting in my palm. Perhaps that had been his plan all along, not merely to provide for me materially, but to create the circumstances that would force me to claim my rightful place, to stop accepting less than I deserved, to recognize that I had always been worthy of love and belonging. "Olivia?" Eliza's voice called from the shore. "The next session is starting. They're asking for you." I stood, tucking the watch back into its place close to my heart. "Coming." As I walked back toward the house, my home, my legacy, I felt Uncle Robert's presence in every step. Not as a ghost or a memory, but as an enduring influence. A voice of truth that had finally helped me find my own. The inheritance that mattered most had never been about property or money. It had been the gift of being truly seen, of having my worth recognized and reflected back to me until I could finally see it for myself. Have you ever realized that the greatest legacy we can leave is not what we own, but how deeply we've seen and valued those entrusted to our care? This was Uncle Robert's true bequest, not the lake house or the investments, but the mirror he had held up to show me my own worth. And in the reflection of that mirror, I had finally found the strength to stand in the full light of my own becoming. 1 year after Uncle Robert's passing, I stood in the garden behind the lake house, watching as volunteers planted native wildflowers along the newly created meditation path. The autumn air carried the scent of earth and pine, a crispness that invigorated rather than chilled. The Robert Bennett Community Arts Foundation had blossomed beyond my initial vision, becoming a vibrant hub for creative education and environmental stewardship. "These will bloom beautifully in spring," said Miguel, our head gardener and ecological consultant. He gestured to the clusters of dormant plants that would transform into riots of color when winter released its hold. "The pollinators will love them." "That's the hope," I replied, smiling as I watched a group of high school students carefully following Miguel's instructions. They were part of our youth leadership program, teenagers from underserved communities developing skills in environmental conservation and arts administration. Creating something that would outlast me, something that would continue to grow and evolve, this had become my mission. Uncle Robert had entrusted me not just with property and wealth, but with the responsibility to use these resources meaningfully. Each program we launched, each student we mentored, each artist we supported was another thread in the tapestry of his legacy. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The screen showed a message from my literary agent: "Great news. 3 publishers interested. Conference call tomorrow to discuss offers." A flutter of excitement and nervousness danced through me. My memoir manuscript, Time Reveals Truth, had gone through multiple revisions over the past months, each draft digging deeper into the complexities of family dynamics, invisible labor, and the journey toward authentic self-worth. The prospect of sharing my story more widely was both terrifying and exhilarating. As I pocketed my phone, Ethan approached, carrying a tray of seedlings. His involvement with the foundation had deepened over the months, his initial tentative volunteering evolving into a paid part-time position coordinating our environmental education programs. The awkwardness between us had gradually dissolved, replaced by a working relationship based on shared values rather than obligatory family ties. "The publishers interested?" he asked, noting my expression. I nodded. 3 of them, apparently. "That's fantastic, Olivia. Dad would be proud." He set down the tray and straightened, brushing soil from his hands. "Have you heard from Mom or Madison about it?" "No. Should I have?" He shrugged. Derek mentioned the manuscript to Madison when they ran into each other at some finance event in Seattle. She wasn't exactly thrilled about the idea of a family memoir. The news didn't surprise me. Madison and Aunt Vivian had maintained their distance since the legal battle ended, their bitterness hardening into a wall of silence. I'd sent formal invitations to foundation events, holiday cards, even a personal note when I'd heard that Aunt Vivian had undergone minor surgery. All had been met with silence. "The book isn't about exposing anyone," I said. "It's about my journey. About finding self-worth after years of feeling invisible. Yes, family dynamics are part of that story, but it's not an exercise in blame." "I know that," Ethan assured me. "And I think on some level, they know it too. That's probably what scares them, the truth being told without embellishment or accusation, just clear-eyed observation." His insight surprised me. The Ethan I'd known growing up had been passive, content to follow his sister's lead and avoid confrontation. This newer version, thoughtful, perceptive, willing to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, was a revelation. "How are things with them?" I asked, realizing I rarely inquired about his relationship with the rest of the family. A shadow crossed his face. "Strained. Mom thinks I've betrayed them by working with you. Madison barely speaks to me except to send passive-aggressive texts about family loyalty." He picked up a seedling, examining its delicate structure. "But I'm learning that loyalty shouldn't require suppressing truth or enabling harmful behaviors." I touched his arm briefly, a gesture of solidarity. "That's a hard lesson. Worth learning, though." He managed a smile. "Anyway, I should get back to the students. They're planning that installation for the spring symposium, and we need to make sure everything gets planted in the right place." As he walked away, I reflected on how profoundly Uncle Robert's final act had changed not just my life, but Ethan's as well. By disrupting the established family dynamic, by forcing a reckoning with long-ignored truths, he had created space for growth and transformation that might never have occurred otherwise. That evening, I sat in Uncle Robert's study, my study now, though it would always carry his essence, finalizing details for an upcoming exhibition. The room had become my sanctuary, the place where I felt most connected to my uncle's vision and values. I'd made few changes, merely adding my own architectural references alongside his, creating a dialogue between our perspectives that felt like the conversations we'd had throughout my life. A gentle knock at the door interrupted my work. Eleanor, the housekeeper who had become an invaluable part of the foundation's operations, stood in the doorway. "Miss Chen, there's someone here to see you. She's waiting at the gate." "Something?" in Eleanor's tone made me look up sharply. "Aunt Vivian?" Eleanor shook her head. "No, it's the younger Ms. Bennett. Madison." My stomach tightened. Madison hadn't set foot on the property since that confrontation at the gate nearly a year ago. Her sudden appearance could signal anything from reconciliation to renewed conflict. "Did she say what she wants?" "Only that it's important and private." Eleanor hesitated. "Shall I tell her you're unavailable?" I considered the option. It would be easy to avoid this encounter, to maintain the boundary that had kept painful family dynamics at bay. But avoidance had never led to growth. "No, I'll see her. Please bring her to the front sitting room. And maybe some tea?" Eleanor nodded and withdrew. I closed my laptop, took a deep breath, and touched Uncle Robert's watch for courage before making my way to the sitting room. Madison was standing by the window when I entered, her back to the door. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, her designer outfit hanging slightly loose on her frame. When she turned, I was struck by how tired she looked, the perfect makeup not quite concealing the shadows under her eyes. "Madison," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "This is unexpected." She didn't smile, but neither did she display the open hostility of our last meeting. "Thank you for seeing me." Eleanor arrived with a tray of tea, setting it on the coffee table before discreetly withdrawing. The familiar ritual of pouring tea gave me a moment to compose myself, to prepare for whatever storm Madison might be bringing. Is everything all right? I asked, handing her a cup. She accepted it, her hands less steady than I remembered. Not really, no. She took a small sip before setting the cup down. Derek left 2 months ago. The wedding's off. The news caught me off guard. Madison and Derek had been together for 5 years, their relationship a cornerstone of her identity and status. I'm sorry to hear that. A bitter laugh escaped her. Are you? I would think you'd be delighted to see me knock down a peg. That's not who I am, Madison. Despite everything, I don't take pleasure in your pain. She studied me for a moment, as if assessing the truth of my words. No, I suppose you don't. That was always more my territory, wasn't it? The admission, subtle but clear, hung in the air between us. I waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. He left because of the money, she continued after a moment. Or rather, the lack of it. Turns out he'd been counting on Dad's inheritance to finance his investment schemes. When that fell through, he stuck around for a while, thinking Mom and I would win the legal challenge. She traced the rim of her teacup with one perfectly manicured finger. When the final appeal was rejected, he was gone within a week. That must have been painful, I said quietly. Humiliating is more accurate. She met my gaze directly. 5 years of building a life with someone, only to discover you were never more than a potential funding source. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Sound familiar? The parallel wasn't lost on me, Madison experiencing with Derek exactly what I had experienced with her and Aunt Vivian for years. But pointing this out would serve no purpose except vindication, and that wasn't what this moment called for. It's a terrible feeling, I said instead. Being valued only for what you can provide, never for who you are. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of recognition, perhaps even the beginning of understanding. Yes, it is. She looked around the sitting room, taking in the subtle changes I'd made, local artwork on the walls, a display of student projects, fresh flowers from the garden. The place looks good. Different, but good. The echo of Ethan's words from months ago wasn't lost on me. Thank you. We've tried to honor Uncle Robert's vision while making space for new ideas. We? The foundation staff. Volunteers. Ethan's been a big help with the environmental programs. At the mention of her brother, Madison's expression tightened. So I've heard. Mom thinks he's betrayed the family. And what do you think? She didn't answer immediately, her gaze drifting to the window where the lake glimmered in the late afternoon light. I think everything I was so certain about has turned out to be built on sand. She looked back at me. Derek. Dad's inheritance. My career. Did you know I lost my job 3 weeks ago? Budget cuts, they said, but I know it was performance issues. I haven't exactly been at my best lately. The admission seemed to cost her, her shoulders tensing as if bracing for mockery or judgment. When neither came, she continued. Mom's not doing well either. The move to Seattle hasn't worked out. She's isolated, bitter. Drinking too much. Madison shook her head. I moved back in with her temporarily, but it's difficult. We feed each other's worst instincts. I set my cup down, struggling to reconcile this vulnerable version of Madison with the cousin who had spent years dismissing my contributions and mocking my choices. I'm truly sorry to hear that. Is there something I can do to help? She looked startled by the offer. Why would you want to help us? After everything? It was a fair question. The easy answer would be that Uncle Robert would have wanted me to show compassion. But the truth ran deeper than obligation to his memory. Because holding on to resentment hurts me more than it hurts you, I said simply. And because I remember what it's like to have your entire sense of self collapse. To question everything you thought was solid. Madison's composure cracked slightly, her eyes brightening with unshed tears. I don't know how to start over. I'm 32 years old, and I've built my entire life around being Dad's golden child, Derek's perfect fiancé, the successful marketing executive. Now I'm none of those things, and I don't know who that leaves. The raw honesty of her admission touched something in me. How many times had I felt similarly lost, my worth so entangled with external validation that I couldn't separate my true self from others' perceptions? It leaves you, Madison. Just you. And maybe that's enough. She blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. Easy for you to say. You've got all this now. She gestured around the room, indicating not just the house but everything it represented: security, purpose, validation. The inheritance didn't make me enough, Madison. It just helped me see that I already was. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. Uncle Robert didn't value me because I was perfect or successful or impressive. He valued me because I was authentically myself, even when that self wasn't celebrated by anyone else. A tear escaped, tracking through her careful makeup. I don't even know who, authentically myself, would be anymore. I've spent so long trying to be what everyone expected. The admission revealed a vulnerability I'd never associated with my confident, polished cousin. For the first time, I could see beyond her perfect exterior to the insecurity that had likely driven much of her behavior, the need to be special, to be celebrated, to be visibly valued in ways that would compensate for deeper doubts about her inherent worth. Maybe that's where you start, I suggested gently. By getting to know yourself apart from everyone's expectations, including your own. She wiped away the tear impatiently. I didn't come here for therapy, Olivia. Why did you come? The directness of the question seemed to catch her off guard. She looked down at her hands, twisting the now empty engagement ring finger. I heard about your book. The memoir. Ah, there it was. And you're concerned about how you'll be portrayed. Wouldn't you be? You haven't exactly had a positive experience with us. It was a fair concern, one I'd grappled with throughout the writing process. The book isn't about vilifying anyone, Madison. It's about my journey towards self-worth after years of feeling invisible within the family. Yes, that includes difficult dynamics, but it's not an exercise in blame or revenge. So you say? But how do I know that's true? I considered for a moment, then stood. Come with me. She looked wary but followed as I led her through the house to Uncle Robert's study. The room, with its wall of my architectural drawings and the desk where I'd found his letter, still held the essence of his presence, a reminder of being truly seen and valued. This is where Uncle Robert left his final message for me, I explained, moving to the desk. Along with journals documenting years of family dynamics, financial contributions, and interactions. He created an irrefutable record that helped secure the inheritance legally. Madison's expression tightened. And now you're going to use it. All in your book. A public takedown of the family that rejected you. I shook my head and opened my laptop, pulling up the manuscript. I could have. Instead, I chose this. I turned the screen toward her, showing her the dedication page, for Uncle Robert, who taught me that being seen is the greatest gift we can give another. And for all who have felt invisible, who have given without recognition, who have questioned their worth in the shadow of others' indifference, you matter. Your value is intrinsic. Your story deserves to be told. Read the first chapter, I said, stepping back to give her space. Hesitantly, she sat in my chair and began to read. I watched her expression shift as she absorbed my words, not a litany of accusations or a catalogue of family sins, but a reflective exploration of how external validation had shaped my sense of self, how financial contribution had become a substitute for emotional connection, how Uncle Robert's consistent affirmation had planted seeds of self-worth that took years to fully bloom. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet. This is not what I expected. What did you expect? A hit piece? Character assassination? Public humiliation? She gestured to the screen. But it's about you, not us. About your internal journey. That's the story worth telling, I said simply. Not a chronicle of blame, but a roadmap for others who might be struggling to recognize their own value. Madison closed the laptop gently, her movements careful as if handling something precious. You've changed, Olivia. We all have, I think. Life has a way of reshaping us, especially when our foundations get shaken. She nodded, looking around the study at the visual record of my creative journey, from childhood sketches to professional designs, all preserved by Uncle Robert's loving attention. He really did see you differently than the rest of us. He tried to see all of us for who we really were, I corrected gently. Not just for what we could do or be for him. I never gave him credit for that. Madison's voice was soft with realization. I was so busy performing, trying to be the perfect daughter, that I never noticed how he tried to connect with the real me underneath the achievement and charm. The admission revealed a perspective I'd never considered, that Madison, too, might have felt unseen in her own way, her worth tied to performance rather than essence. It's not too late to honor that part of his legacy, I said. To practice seeing others, and yourself, with that same generosity and clarity. She stood, moving toward the wall of my architectural drawings. Is that what you're doing with the foundation? Continuing his way of seeing people? Trying to. Creating space for others to be seen, valued, supported in their authentic expression. I joined her, looking at a framed sketch from my college years, a design for a community arts center that had won a statewide competition. It's what gave me a sense of purpose when the inheritance first came through. Not just preserving what he built, but extending its reach. Madison turned to face me, her expression more open than I'd ever seen it. I don't know if Mom and I can ever have a real relationship with you, Olivia. There's too much history, too much hurt on all sides. I understand that. But I do want you to know that I'm sorry. For my part in making you feel invisible. For taking without acknowledging. For being cruel when you were only ever generous. The words seemed to cost her, but she maintained eye contact, owning the apology fully. The acknowledgement, something I'd never expected to receive, washed over me like a wave, releasing tension I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Thank you for saying that. She nodded, then glanced at her watch. I should go. Mom will be wondering where I am, and I didn't tell her I was coming here. As we walked back through the house toward the front entrance, Madison paused in the sunroom where the student art exhibition was being prepared for the weekend. The house feels different now, she observed. Alive in a new way. That's the hope, that it becomes a living legacy rather than just a preserved memorial. At the front door, an unexpected awkwardness descended. We weren't quite family anymore, not in the conventional sense, but neither were we merely strangers or adversaries. We occupied some new, undefined territory, perhaps the beginning of a relationship based on truth rather than obligation or resentment. If you ever need help, I said, with job searching or anything, the foundation has connections. Resources. Madison smiled faintly. I'll keep that in mind. She hesitated, then added, and if you'd like to send an advance copy of the book, before publication. I promised to read it with an open mind. I'd appreciate that. After she left, I returned to the study, looking out over the lake as twilight descended. The water reflected the changing sky, transforming from blue to purple to deep indigo as stars began to appear. Uncle Robert's watch hung warm against my skin, a constant reminder of being seen, of being valued, of being loved not for what I could provide but for who I essentially was. Madison's visit had been unexpected, but perhaps it was another thread in the tapestry Uncle Robert had begun weaving long before his death, a pattern of truth-telling, of authentic seeing, of valuation based on essence rather than utility. The past year had brought transformation I could never have imagined, from invisible supporter to visible creator, from financial contributor to community builder, from a woman defined by others' perceptions to one standing firmly in her own truth. The inheritance had provided resources and validation, but the true gift had been the permission to finally see myself clearly, to recognize my own worth even when others failed to acknowledge it. Outside, the lake rippled gently in the evening breeze, stars reflecting on its surface like scattered diamonds. Time continues to reveal truth, I thought, touching the watch that had become my talisman. Not just about others, but about ourselves. Have you discovered that your truest inheritance may not be what others leave you, but what you finally allow yourself to claim, your authentic voice, your intrinsic worth, your capacity to transform pain into purpose? As darkness settled over the lake, I returned to my desk and opened the manuscript once more. There was still work to be done, stories to be shaped, truths to be shared. Not for vindication or validation, but for connection, offering a hand to others walking similar paths, assuring them they were not alone in their journey from invisibility to inheritance. In the end, that was Uncle Robert's greatest legacy, not the material wealth he'd left me, but the example of seeing clearly, loving authentically, and creating space for others to emerge into their fullest selves. It was a legacy I would spend a lifetime honoring, one story, one program, one act of recognition at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.